Hello and welcome to another Greater Somerville and SCATV's continuing specials for Massachusetts election 2014. My guest on this episode is United Independent Party candidate for Governor of Massachusetts, Evan Falchuk. Evan founded the United Independent Party in 2013 along with like-minded voters who desired not to be pigeonholed with the label of Democrat or Republican, and who think that politics has become predictable, frustrating, and uninspiring. In a break from the traditional method of individual candidates from the Democrat and Republican parties separately running for governor and lieutenant governor, Evan and his lieutenant governor running mate, Angus Jennings, are running as a team. Evan and Angus Jennings are both Massachusetts natives, Falchuk an executive in the global healthcare industry, and Jennings, a land planning professional and small business owner. Their vision of the new third party in Massachusetts is based on the principle that everyone is equal, everyone's civil rights must be protected, and the Commonwealth must spend taxpayers' money wisely. In May, the team of Falchuk and Jennings of the United Independent Party submitted the required signatures to the Secretary of the Commonwealth and will appear on November's ballot in the general election. It is my pleasure to welcome to Greater Somerville candidate for Governor of Massachusetts, Evan Falchuk. Welcome to SCATV. Welcome to Greater Somerville.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
You are the third candidate for Governor of Massachusetts that has beaten the Union Square traffic in Somerville. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, how you doing?
I'm doing great.
Good. I know it's a whirlwind of interviews and a lot of press.
Yes.
The conventions for the other parties are coming up soon. Tell me a little bit, Evan, if you will, about yourself first and then the party itself.
I'm 44, and as you said, I'm from here in Massachusetts. My wife, Felicia, and I have 3 kids who are, one's about to turn 14, the other ones are 11 and 7, and they're in the Newton Public Schools. And as you pointed out, I'm a business person. I was the president of a healthcare company called Best Doctors that we grew from 9 employees to 600 employees. And I'm a voter, which is why I'm running for governor, is that you said it so well in describing the political process that I think is based on an establishment that most people feel doesn't take them seriously or doesn't treat them seriously, that doesn't represent those values of everybody being equal and everybody's civil rights having to be protected, and at the same time saying that our government has to spend our money wisely. So to break from that, you have to create a new framework. That's why I founded the United Independent Party, so we could bring about that kind of smart, brave reform of our politics, economy, and government.
You founded the party along with some other voters here in Massachusetts in 2013. Has it been kind of a challenge to get the word out that there is a third party?
It's challenging in the sense that it's hard work like anything else that you do. This is an innovative, entrepreneurial kind of exercise. You know, in America, so many times when you see something that's not working, you create something new. And that's what we did with the United Independent Party. You don't see so much of it in politics. You see the predictable, you see the left-right debate, you see the endless discussions about things that really are not attached to the issues that people care about. So, for example, the cost of living being so high in our state, driven by healthcare costs and by housing costs. And the debate ends up being about things other than those issues, because these issues are hard. But we do have the capability to talk about them in real ways, no vague generalities, but instead real, actual, practical ways of resolving these things and to build a framework to make them into a reality.
As you know, Evan, the 2 major parties, I shouldn't exclude other parties that are functioning in the Commonwealth. The 2 major parties, the Republican and the Democrats, they tend to let running mates run on their own.
Yeah.
You and Angus have chosen to run as a team, I've noticed. Can you talk a little bit about that? And
the idea of a party, there's actually only 2 recognized parties in Massachusetts, it's the Democrats and the Republicans. And together they've done some things that present barriers to new entrants into the political process. So one of them is our campaign finance laws in Massachusetts. So as a Democrat or a Republican candidate for statewide office, you can raise up to $15,000 per person per year for your campaign. As an independent, myself and Angus are only allowed to raise $1,500 per person per year. So that's a 10-to-1 advantage that they have. Another requirement is, in order to get onto the ballot, the party candidates are allowed to collect signatures just for them on their own. It's a great pleasure for me to be running with Angus, but one of the requirements for an independent is that you have to have a team running together before you're allowed to collect any signatures. So there have been a series of barriers that are put in the way, and it's one of the reasons why living in the Commonwealth, where we have 53% of voters not enrolled in the Democratic or Republican Party, we don't have any state legislators who are independent. The system is set up to protect the establishment and the status quo. And the reason to found United Independent, the reason that Angus and I are in this race, is to break through that and create that framework so we can change things for the better.
And it is frustrating. You know, I've been around politics for quite a while now, and it is frustrating to a lot of the voters that they're only given a choice. You can either be Republican or Democrat, or you can unenroll from a party.
That's right.
And vote the way that you want to vote. Mm-hmm. So it's going to be an interesting year in the gubernatorial race with an independent party now operating.
It's really important. I mean, that's what voters are looking for, is that combination that we're talking about. And I think in the past they've seen independent candidates that may have been protest or fringe or up to something else, but we're doing exactly what it is we say we're going to do, which is you can read on the Falchuk2014.org website lots of policy positions and pretty clearly stated. Same thing on our Facebook pages, both on the Evan Falchuk MA and on the United Independent Party page, where we engage in conversation with people, which is not what is the norm in politics today, and it should be. But it only will be when we elect people who feel that way.
Then let's delve into some of the issues. You know, I've been onto your website and we've discussed a little bit. We'll get into those issues, but first I'd be remiss. Congratulations in collecting the required number of signatures.
Yeah, it's a big logistical effort. You know, we're over 13,000 signatures. You need 10,000 to be on the ballot. It's a testament to the kind of organization we've got with 12 full-time staff and dozens and dozens of volunteers and interns and others that are just working hard every day. It can be done if people work hard to make it into a reality.
You did it.
Thank you.
You and your team did it.
Thank you.
So let's chat a little bit about, the United Independent Party. One lead question. Do you take your lead from the Independent Party, United Independent Party, or you as a candidate within that party, are you allowed to format your own platform?
That's what we're doing. That's the beauty of this, is that I founded it with those supporters that helped me put this together. And the premise of it is that, again, everybody is equal and everybody's civil rights must be protected, and the government has to spend our money wisely. Underneath that umbrella, we have to figure out what are the important issues to deal with in our state. And the cost of living, to me, is the number one issue. All the trouble of income inequality and wealth inequality is driven by the fact that it is so expensive to live here. So in a world in which incomes have remained flat for many, many years while the cost of living has gone up, these are the causes of our issues. So in healthcare, the monopolistic consolidation of hospitals into giant systems, which has been going on since the 1990s in Massachusetts, those systems raise their prices like any good monopoly will do. And that then flows through to consumers and businesses and state government and local government in the form of higher costs of healthcare. That's what's plaguing our system. The state government has not taken action to stop those kinds of mergers from happening. The Attorney General, Martha Coakley, who's running for governor, recently approved the acquisition of South Shore Hospital by Partners, which the Nonpartisan Health Policy Commission said would cost consumers $30 million or more a year, but she approved it. So we need to change our mentality around healthcare to recognize the root cause of our troubles, which is the fee-for-service system of medicine, the need to fill beds with high-paying patients, which drives these kinds of problems. And it can be fixed, but it requires that kind of bravery and smarts about how do we make it different.
Let's stay on healthcare for a minute, and you cited the fact that some of the smaller hospitals are being, I always put it, coming from the banking industry, I look at it as big fish, little fish.
Indeed.
So the big fish is gobbling up the weaker.
Mm-hmm.
There is the argument to be made, and this is neither Democrat nor Republican, but the counter argument to that is, why would we want to let a smaller, weaker hospital system fail and allow a larger one, healthier one with more financial resource come in and prop that up to serve the community that they're functioning in?
Well, in the current model, you can't let it fail. The bigger hospital has to buy it, but we have to realize that that problem is caused by the current model. The smaller community hospital can't stay in business unless it's acquired by the bigger hospital. When it acquires them, it raises its prices. The remaining community hospitals can't compete against this giant system, so they start having financial trouble, which means their only choice is to get bought by the bigger hospital system. You can see what happens in what we've seen with South Shore Hospital, the fact that North Adams Regional Hospital recently closed because it couldn't fill its beds. UMass Memorial is starting to have some financial issues. The path that the logic of this model heads down is one in which we just have maybe a few giant hospital systems and nothing else, and much more expensive care than needs to be the case. We can change the model. Maryland has done this. They created a system where you had an equitable fee schedule. You shift the risk of care onto hospitals. You pay them a global budget, and you say, listen, it's no longer fee for service. That's your budget. So you should decide, do you want to fill your beds and lose money, or do you want to do more work with public health, have some efficiencies, maybe get rid of some of the highly compensated executives.
Find what you're good at and concentrate on it.
Exactly. And if care can be delivered more effectively at a community hospital, then it will be under that kind of a model. But in today's model, it's all about getting bigger. It's why you see all the construction happening in the Longwood Medical area. It's to fill beds. It's why you see advertising on the highway for procedures at hospitals, because they want you to come in there and get those procedures done. If we change the model, they'd be saying, listen, take better care of yourself. Quit smoking. Manage your diabetes better. Let us help you do it in a way to keep you from coming into the hospital in the first place. But our system is trapped in this fee-for-service model, driven by large moneyed interests that the big hospital systems represent.
The hospital systems right now are heavily on fixing the problem after it happens.
Indeed.
Instead of preventive medicine.
And they, like in so many areas of our economy, have an outsized influence over policymaking. So as voters, what are we watching when we see the healthcare debate? We hear a lot of argument about the Affordable Care Act, right, or Obamacare, depending on what side you're on.
Or Romneycare in Massachusetts.
And you hear about the website not functioning properly. And none of it has to do with this question of what about the monopolistic consolidation of hospitals? And why can't we talk about that? Well, in this campaign, when I go and I'm in the debates and forums with other candidates, I raise this all the time. Voters need to hear it. They need to recognize the difference between hearing a candidate talk in vague generalities about these issues and one that's engaging on them and saying we have to take on these issues that we have in our politics become too meek about and to tackle them head on.
Let's move on to, we talked a little bit about healthcare. Your general sense on how well the new national healthcare system is working, or is it too soon to judge?
Well, Massachusetts has basically had a system very much like what has been implemented or is being implemented nationally since 2006. We've got a pretty good picture of what it looks like. People are covered to a large extent. Our costs keep going up. And the reason for that is again, what I said. The hospitals have been consolidating into the giant systems. Everyone's covered. All those costs get flown through your insurance premiums. So every time they merge and every time they raise their prices, every single consumer in Massachusetts pays more. And it isn't that the quality of care is improving through these mergers. We've got great quality of care in Massachusetts, probably the best in the world, but it's much more expensive than it needs to be. And it's driven by this distorted market that's been created by the hospital systems. So is the Romney Care, Obamacare version of healthcare that we have here in Massachusetts working? People are covered, but it's working very well for those hospital systems that are doing so well under this environment.
Job creation here in Massachusetts. As you know, during the Great Recession, Massachusetts fared well compared to the rest of the country. Our foreclosure rates were not anywhere near Arizona or California or Florida. But the question that we have is there are still people hurting in Massachusetts in terms of looking for jobs, or they're working 2 or 3 part-time jobs. Job creation under your administration.
It's an enormous priority, and that's why I talk about the cost of living. So what drives economic growth in the 21st century? It's not the idea that if we can lure big companies here to open up factories with high-paying, low-skilled jobs, that's economic growth. It isn't. But so much of government policy is geared towards this idea that we can bring back that economy. It's small businesses and medium-sized businesses. And what helps those businesses grow is reducing their costs. And the biggest costs those businesses face are healthcare costs, as I mentioned, but also something that people don't think of as being tied to job creation. It's housing. There's lots of economic research that has been done that says if you want to have lots of new jobs created, you should be building lots of houses. an interesting point. And what's happening in our state is that there have been study after study that shows that we need to be building at least 10,000 new houses per year, and I'm talking about workforce housing, stuff that is affordable to most people. But we're not even coming anywhere near that. And the reason is cities and towns do not find it in their financial best interest to allow for this kind of housing production to take place. Well, we have to change policy to make it in their financial best interest to do it. And the surest way to do it is to make sure that education is properly funded by the state. So we've got a formula for supporting schools that the state has had since 1993. It has not been updated in a decade. It doesn't reflect the true cost of teaching kids today in a modern school system. We have to increase the amount of money that goes to those school systems. It will make it so that cities and towns will allow for more housing to be built. It'll put more money in the pockets of small businesses and consumers and individuals. It'll allow young people to have a place to live and the ability to save. That's how you grow jobs. That's how you grow an economy.
As you know, Somerville is going through its renaissance right now, much to the credit of the folks who have been here for many, many years and the newcomers that are coming in. I give all the credit in the world to both parties. The problem that we are having is exactly what you're talking about, Evan. The housing that's being built here in Somerville in 2014 is not family friendly.
That's right.
It is not affordable to the average guy who's working at a medium range job.
Yep.
Many of the old time families are being priced out. So under your administration, specifically, how do we create within the urban environment family-size housing when we have that conundrum of a mayor like Joe Curtatone saying, the city has financial needs.
It does.
We have to build. And right now, the appetite is for the studio, the luxury, and the high end.
Right. The cities and towns are reasonable in what they're doing, even if it's bad overall for the economy. So if you build family-sized housing, then there's going to be kids in those homes, and they're going to have to go to school, and it's expensive to do this.
Which feeds the education system.
That's right. Now, inherently, that's a good thing. We should want more of that. But so much of policy in cities and towns around the state is designed to say, keep kids out. They call it child-proof zoning. I mean, the fact they've got terms for this is kind of crazy.
It's crazy and it's scary.
It is indeed. And so the solution to this is to make sure that we're funding education in a way that's what I call growth neutral. Other people have described it in this way, that encourages cities and towns to produce exactly that kind of housing. That's what we need. The kind of renaissance that you see happening in Somerville should be happening in all sorts of places around the Commonwealth, but it should be driven by housing that's affordable for people. So if you fund the education, then a mayor of a city or town and the city council or town meeting, whatever it is, will say, boy, we're going to do better if we allow more young people to move here, people with families. That'll bring businesses. That'll bring the kind of hustle and bustle that you want to see in a downtown area, no matter where it is in the Commonwealth. It can be done, and the key to it, the underlying point, the way that you can release that potential is by making sure that cities and towns find it to be in their financial best interests. Moving
into one of the other things that is kind of the impetus here in Somerville is the extension of the Green Line. Transportation is an incredibly important part of any town's growth. If it doesn't have roads, it doesn't grow. If it doesn't have public transportation, you can't get from one place to another for those who don't own a car or choose not to own a car. The Green Line coming into Somerville has really been one of the sparks of the gentrification that we're seeing that's happening with the high price of housing, but it is a necessary part of the city's growth. The transportation infrastructure in the Commonwealth has made some strides, but your plan to bring even more federal dollars and to have the state sustain itself in its own infrastructure, transportation infrastructure.
You have, first of all, it starts by increasing the number of people that are living here, increasing the tax base, which is all about the things that I just talked about, lowering that cost of living. Otherwise, we're going to be in this constant role of managing scarcity. If you were to try to design policies to say, let's make sure that our state continues to lose population and on average gets older and doesn't have enough young people to support the obligations the state have, you would probably design policies just like the ones that we have today in Massachusetts. We got to reverse that completely. And it requires the state to invest money in making it possible to change those dynamics. So investments like the extension of the Green Line are fantastic for that purpose. We have to couple it with policies that lead towards the production of housing that's affordable for people, workforce housing, families to be able to own their first home, but close to and near amenities, transit, and other issues. So those things are all inextricably linked. They're all completely tied together. It's why when you take a look at our campaign, Angus Jennings, as a land use planner, has worked on so many projects like this. It's all about trying to pull those pieces together and saying, how do we bring the resources of the state, leverage what's coming from the federal government to drive the kind of development that makes sense for our future.
As the old saying goes, Rome was not built in a day. To pull down the ancient and archaic zoning laws within the Commonwealth, as you know, most of the municipalities have their own, but many times they have to go back to the state for a home rule petition.
Yep.
That, I've heard from elected officials, many times that inhibits growth within the municipalities and the townships. How would you kind of structure Massachusetts land banking versus the growth that you're saying we need more people to grow the tax base?
Well, in our current model, we've got a plan coming out in the next day or so called the Thriving Communities Action Plan, because we're very fixated on this exact issue. In the current model, development happens either through zoning or through what they call 40B developments, these affordable housing developments that people end up being not happy about, although it's needed as a way to build affordable housing. But the current model is designed to create sprawl, this sort of spread out development, cutting down wooded areas in order to build houses, because where else are you going to construct homes? Instead of channeling those development dollars into a portfolio of districts that are shovel ready, that are designed to be multi-generational, multi-use housing areas with commercial districts and places where young people can live with families. We can funnel development money in that direction if we can create state policy that makes in the financial best interest of cities and towns to do it. The good news is the tools are in place. There's provisions of state law that were passed in 2004 that have been barely used, called 40R, that allow for the development of these kinds of communities, but it hasn't been taken advantage of. Our plan involves making sure that we support the cities and towns with aid for education, for infrastructure, and for other purposes to release that kind of economic potential. It's there. The fact that we've underinvested in it as a Commonwealth for so long means that there's a huge portfolio of opportunities that are available to do the kind of development that we're talking about, and that's what our plan is all about.
Taxes, it's a way of life. Taxes are a way of life.
Yeah.
But I noticed on a lot of what you talk about, you and Angus talk about, is cutting costs, where costs can be cut, because that basically prohibits having to raise more taxes. So if you find waste, your plan on waste and corruption.
There's a lot of it. I mean, you can look at the easy examples are the enormous tax cuts that go out to large corporations based on this outdated model of how you drive economic growth. So, for example, the famous one was Intel recently that got that $300 million tax break to keep a factory open that ultimately closed. Things like that shouldn't be happening. That's money that could have gone to so many important purposes, whether it was services to veterans or seniors, education, road construction, but instead it was used in that manner. We have to change that philosophy. Of course, in government there is always waste that can be found, even if we're only talking about 3% in that budget. That's $1 billion a year. There's money that's there. With that said, our tax code does need to be modernized. We have a flat tax under our Constitution. It should be, we should have a tax modernization commission to say, what would a tax code look like that was built for a 21st century economy? Or if we're really bold, a 22nd century economy, because we're living on a tax code that was designed back in the end of the 19th century. We're capable of that kind of forward-looking approach, and not to be constrained by what we believe to be our limitations, but instead, what are we capable of? What could we do?
Go into small business just for, maybe 2 minutes here. Small business being the backbone of a state like Massachusetts. We haven't got mega industries operating here. But I asked two of your challengers, in terms of, some of the stuff that really irritates the voter is when a tax incentive program is sold to us as a good thing, and then the company leaves. You touched on that. Your idea on a clawback, absolute, mandatory, rock solid?
There should be.
Yep.
The bigger challenge with these things is that oftentimes those tax breaks are based on promises that they're going to hire a certain number of workers. And companies, look, I come from the business world, companies are pretty clever. And many times when you see those tax incentives given out to companies saying, hey, we'll hire all kinds of people, those companies know they're going to hire those people. The consolidation of the pharma and biotech industries in Cambridge is driven by accessibility to places like MIT and Harvard and the research labs and the incredible scientific work that's being done there. The tax breaks that were given to those industries did not cause that to take place. although it's easy to jump in front of the parade and march and say, hey, we did this. It's one of the problems we have in the politics of our country. It's one of the things that motivates me, is that everybody remembers when President George W. Bush landed on the aircraft carrier and stood in front of a banner that said mission accomplished. Well, that has become the norm in politics today. Let's go do that. Let's say, hey, we solved the problem, and then
Let's
walk
have a
away.
press conference.
Yep, let's make it look good.
Drive a nail, let's have a press conference.
Let's have a press conference. And I think I know we have to get away from it. And the way we'll do it is by talking about issues just like this and saying, look, this is what the real deal is, and to get away from the vague platitudes.
We have, President Obama has recently come out with a new emissions cap or reduction target. Your idea in Massachusetts in terms of our clean energy, how we're going to power the state going forward?
Well, we need to invest more in clean energy for a lot of reasons. Among them, the need to diversify our energy sources. We're very reliant on natural gas here, and that presents a problem for those of us who care about carbon emissions because it's become really, really cheap. And so the argument against investing in renewable energy sources has just become a little bit more challenging. But we have to do it anyway. We have to diversify. We also have to make sure we harden our infrastructure because there will be stronger storms and more frequent ones. And so our vision should be about a distributed energy generating capability so that cities and towns and consumers around the Commonwealth aren't at risk when a storm comes through of having
One
a large
gets knocked
scale.
Out, you can have a redundant system.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's how the internet works. And our power grid is based on far more antiquated technology. Well, we can do that as well if we're able to be visionary about how things should look.
One of the things that our mayor, Joe Curtatone, and many of the town managers, mayors, city councils, Board of Aldermen all worry about is state assistance, the funding that flows back through multiple programs. One of the things that they were looking at is how the state lottery system operates and the money that flows back. One of the things under discussion was casinos should be folded into that so that the profit from casinos comes back to the cities and towns, the host cities and towns. We only have probably about 30 seconds left, but your idea on casinos, yes, no, or let it stand?
We voted, it passed, the cities and towns voted, the ones that wanted them have them. People want to put it on the ballot, it can go on the ballot. I'd vote against it. I think we need to move forward.
Evan, it's been a pleasure. My best wishes.
Thanks for having me.
We'll see you probably around the campaign trail.
You bet.
Thanks for coming into SCATV.
I know where to find you.
There you go. My guest today has been Evan Falchuk, candidate for governor of Massachusetts. As always, thanks for tuning in. Stay safe, stay informed. See you next time.